It is the duty of the free man to resist tyranny at every turn. Every man will either watch his freedom stripped away or take action to protect what he loves. Introducing the A3, the newest revolutionary body armor from Armored Republic. The A3 is the new standard for lightweight multi-hit body armor. A3 plates are incredibly light at 4.6 pounds. The patented design captures fragmentation while remaining multi-hit capable. The A3 will stop up to M80 ball, yet comes in at only 0.7 inches thick. The A3 is the thinnest NIJ .06 compliant or certified composite standalone plate that includes the drop test. The A3 is the first of its kind, patent pending, that combines an alloy strike face with polyethylene backing, revolutionizing body armor technology by providing strength and durability while remaining sleek and maneuverable. The A3 is the new standard in lightweight body armor. The fight against tyranny just got stronger.
A master called together a few young men of this generation and spoke to them, saying, "I gave your great-grandfathers a time of despair and poverty and global war. They were strong and victorious and built an empire greater than any other. But they were terrible fathers and raised entitled sons and daughters of rot who inherited everything through no courage of their own. To those rotten sons, your own grandfathers, I gave abundance and wealth and stability. But they pissed it all away on debauchery and sexual revolution, establishing many idols and slaughtering tens of millions of children in sacrifice to their appetites. One generation fought against the perpetrators of a great Holocaust. The next dishonored that victory with an even greater Holocaust of their own children. The children who did survive, your fathers, carried on the sexual descent of their parents into new madness and new disease, piercing and inking their skin like death-worshipping pagans as they did, establishing special days of pride to celebrate the debauch, slaughtering more children and castrating and poisoning others, claiming to be creators when they were destroyers, mutilating the young and calling it acceptance. All these generations I have judged, and am judging. Their madness now is only a taste of my wrath." The young men were afraid and asked the master why he had called them and why he was telling them these things. "Because it is now your turn. I am giving all of this chaos to you," he said. "Your inheritance is a world of crumbling false gods crowded with blind and mad worshippers. I am entrusting you with a world of empires built on cracked and heaving foundations. The time of your inheritance is near. You have only a little while to prepare yourselves. Seize this moment of chaos and build me a world of sanity and righteousness. When I return, I will judge what you have built for me. With so much rubble to work with, I expect great things." The master turned to leave, but the young men begged him to wait. "How can we do this?" they asked. "There are hundreds of millions of unbelievers in our nation alone and only a few of us." Their master answered, saying, "I am not a hard master. You will have the truth and wisdom if you desire it. And you may each choose one woman to help you. That should be enough. Go now and build New St. Andrews College. Carpe Chaos."
Uh-oh. This time it worked.
Beautiful.
We major in great transitions. That's what we do here.
So smooth. So
the
fresh.
smoothest transitions you've ever seen.
We were literally about to go live, and then our sound just shut down. And we had to go
Everything.
back to commercials.
Didn't we actually did go live for a second?
Yeah, it did.
Did
It
we?
flickered. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It went
I
live.
missed that.
Yeah, people that were paying attention, they were like, "Wait, where'd they go?" They're like,
And then back.
was that the rapture?"
James was like, "Oh, my goodness, it's true."
It's true. I should have been pre-mill this whole time.
I know.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to Cross Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. It's good to be with you this Advent season on Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
Yes.
And we got to...
Like how you say that.
Because
Like-
yesterday I thought it was Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm excited tonight because we got our school's Christmas
Oh, it's
concert.
so good.
It's so good.
It's so good. And it's at a different location this time than it normally
It's
is.
at the ICCU?
Yes, I think so. If that's what the place is.
That's what it is.
You know, it's so funny because I think I was talking about this last year. I was talking about the fact that I couldn't find parking.
Yeah.
And I almost started complaining. And I'm like, look at all this blessing here. I got to park 3 blocks away to get inside to hear the Christmas singing and the carols and stuff. And it's like, this is beautiful.
Right.
This is not something to complain about.
Right. It's the Christmas concert is so packed.
Yes.
We have so many hundreds of kids
Learning about Jesus.
singing beautifully. And now you can't find a parking place.
Yeah, and I'm going to complain about that?
Yeah,
Shame
right,
on me.
right.
No, sir.
Exactly.
Won't have that problem tonight, though.
We talked about that last week in our testimony.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. We can.
Sales Nexus is the platform Fight Laugh Feast uses to manage all of our subscribers and email updates. If you're using MailChimp, HubSpot, or Salesforce for email marketing, CRM, and sales, you probably know they've been canceling Voices of Freedom and Truth. That's why we switched to Sales Nexus. Sales Nexus is a complete business, marketing, and sales solution that won't tell you what you should say or believe. So for more information, visit salesnexus.com. That's salesnexus.com.
Wow.
Hey, were you going to light those candles? Or is this
You know what?
is this
I
a
show
no-
is.
No lighting candles day.
No, this is a lighting candles day.
Oh, it is? Okay.
I need
All
some
right.
more music, though.
Toby's having a hard time with his liturgy.
I know. I was like, I don't know which days we light the candles.
Did you go EO on me or something?
No, there's these candles, and they're like, we don't usually have that thing going on in here, and then you're going to burn your hand, and oh, golly. Oh, boy. All right, I'm just going to read. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 10 through 12, God, you did, didn't you? I see that.
Almost.
God tells of the gold in the land of Havilah, and that the gold of that land is good. Ever since the dawn of our father's world, gold has been universally recognized as true money, and therefore the most reliable store of savings. CrossPolitics' corporate partner, Alps Precious Metals, enables their clients to protect their God-given, hard-earned wealth from the serious financial problems that are upon us. Alps provides the CrossPolitic family with the best strategies and solutions for investing in physical precious metals. As a result, you can enjoy a peace of mind that can be had with few other investments.
You can rejoice.
Call James Hunter of Alps at 251-377-2197. That's James Hunter at Alps Precious Metals, 251-377-2197. And visit their website at www.alpspmg.com.
Tell them Cross Politics sent you.
That's right.
That's right.
Hey, we're really grateful to have with us our friend James Rayment. Since 2012, he's been building relationships with the Muslim community in Seattle. This quest has resulted in the creation of the Al-Maida Initiative. At Al-Maida, James focuses on researching, understanding, and communicating the foundational ideas in the Bible and the Muslim world. The goal of all this is building friendly and substantial conversations between Christians and Muslims. James, thanks for joining us on Cross Politic again.
Good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on in the Middle East right now. I'm sure you've been having some conversations with your friends about all of this. I think there's probably a lot of our audience that sort of heard little blips and little spikes, but honestly probably aren't sure exactly what just happened. Something significant just happened in Syria in particular.
Assad is out,
And
it looks like.
Let James tell the story.
If you don't mind, could you walk us
I just
through?
want people to know that I can say Assad.
Thank you.
But,
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe. Just would you let us know, so what happened? Why is this important?
And James, before you start, wait a second. Could you tilt your camera down for me a little bit, just so I can have your head? I want you to look. There we go. I want you to look very important.
Yeah.
Right.
High
Okay.
stat. There we go.
There we go.
Done. So basically, there has been a dictator ruling the country of Syria since the 1970s, basically. And this has been a member of the Ba'ath Party, which is the same sort of mostly secular left-wing ideology with some Islamic sprinklings on it that was also ruling Iraq in Saddam Hussein's time as well.
Yeah.
So same kind of ideology there. And there's a guy called Hafiz al-Assad. And then he was delegating the government to his son, but his oldest son died in a motorcycle or car crash in Damascus. And his second son, who was a doctor in London, was recalled back to Syria and then groomed to take over leadership. And at 34 years old, in the year 2000, Bashar al-Assad became the dictator of Syria.
Just
And-
from a doctor to dictator.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Easy.
like an eye doctor. And from what everyone says, he was like a great doctor too.
Okay.
Like really good with patients, excellent bedside manner.
Yeah.
Really personable guy.
And he
Wow.
could just flip on the dictatorship, switch just like that.
You ever heard of COVID?
I actually think how like nice and unassuming he was actually part of the problem. So his dad was a giant personality who ruled Syria with an iron fist, but was also a very charismatic leader as well. Bashar al-Assad had none of his father's charisma and all of his father's power, which meant he had to lean even harder on the power when he became the president, because there were lots of people that did not think he was up to the job.
Right.
So he's ruling Syria with an increasingly iron fist from the year 2000 onwards. And then in 2011, we had something called the Arab Spring, when a merchant in Tunisia set himself on fire to protest government policy there. And protests erupted all across the Arab world and eventually hit Syria. So in Syria, people started protesting the government, and Bashar al-Assad, in his typical fashion, started shooting the protesters, sending the Air Force to bomb the protesters.
Wow.
And then eventually, parts of his own army revolted against him and started standing to protect the protesters against Assad's government.
Wow.
Then, over the next few years, the rebel government was pushing back Assad and taking more and more territory for him, but he recruited the help of Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. And basically, from 2015 onwards, he has been gradually driving the rebels back to the very far north sliver in Syria up until about 2 weeks ago.
When you mean rebels, do you mean like one homogeneous group or like a bunch of factions?
A lot of different factions. So there's three main buckets. Those buckets all have, subgroups in them as well, right? So think of them as equivalent to like the PCA, PCUSA, and the CREC, right?
Whoa, PCUSA?
Whoa.
Come on, man.
I speak fluent Presbyterian, so I can.
There's more factions in Baptist theology, bro. Come on now.
Yeah. So okay, but even let's say you have Baptist, Presbyterian, Lutheran, right? Let's say you have three big umbrellas and then lots of subgroups under them.
So you got Assad, Lutheran. You
Stop.
No, actually, if you want to go that way, one thing that's really interesting about this is Bashar al-Assad is part of a very, very specific subsect that most Muslims don't even consider Muslim. So think of it as equivalent to having like a Mormon dictator of Mexico.
Okay. I'm following this.
Oh, wow.
I'm
Okay.
totally following
That works.
this. Yeah, right.
So he is in the Alawites, and their theology is very mysterious, but actually seem to borrow some Christian theology and apply it to Ali, Muhammad's nephew, and kind of make him the physical incarnation of God. And some people will absolutely own that, and other Alawites will say, no, we don't believe that at all. So again, very much like Mormonism.
Okay.
And so the three factions fighting against Assad have been the Kurdish militias up in the northeast of the country. Then you have a sort of Muslim Brotherhood, which is like, kind of hardcore Muslim, but believes in democracy, mixed with sort of a secular democratic group of people. And then you've got the more sort of Islamist, hardline, Salafi, super conservative Sunni faction, led by a guy called Mohammed Jelani, in the sort of northeast of the country. And so those are the three main factions.
Oh, you can keep going.
Yeah, well,
Okay. I'm
still stuck on the Lutheran thing, but we can move on.
Yeah. So then what happened? So you've got he's in power with up until now.
Oh, that's another question I had. What do you mean he had to rule? This is a Bashar Assad?
Bashar al-Assad.
Bashar al-Assad.
Bashar.
What do you mean he was ruling with an increased iron fist? Like, what was that iron fist doing?
So very much turning Syria into a police state,
Okay.
meaning you'd lock up political dissidents and throw away the key. and they'd go into a dark dungeon and they'd never see the light of day again. And so over the last few days that the rebels have been releasing people from prisons who don't even realize that Assad's dad, who died in the year 2000, is dead.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so you have people who have had no contact with the outside world who are kind of coming out of these bunker prisons and being like, what the heck has happened here?
Yeah.
So no due process, using the military and the police against his own people whenever they step out of line, basically.
Okay, so 2011 happens, and then 2014 happens, where didn't Obama bomb Syria?
No, Obama said he was going to bomb Syria if Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons against his own people.
That's right.
He called it a red line.
Yep.
He didn't do that, and then Putin wrote a pretty good op-ed in the New York Times about democracy and not intervening, and then Putin sent the Russian army into Syria. So
to back up Assad.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
So how that transitions into today. So Assad has basically been propped up by the Russian army, the Iranian government, and Hezbollah, who act as a military arm of the Iranian government in Syria.
Yep.
Now, over the last few years, Russia is getting increasingly bogged down in Ukraine and is putting more and more of its resources into this sort of meat grinder on the front lines of Ukraine. Hezbollah has been basically decimated by the Israeli military in Lebanon, and the Iranian government is weakened as well. It's wasted a lot of resources on fighting Israel over the last couple of years. And so this provided a kind of golden opportunity for the rebels to take advantage of a quiet situation where Assad was basically devoid of all his backup.
Yeah.
And with a lot of speed and the element of surprise, they basically managed to rout his entire apparatus from the country in a period of less than 2 weeks.
Well, and it also seems like he already had maybe some sort of sympathy in this military against him and for the rebels. So the rebels rise up. Putin was maybe some sort of leveraging point. If his current military maybe started to rebel against him, he could sick Putin on him.
Exactly, yeah.
And then now Putin's distracted with the Ukraine war, and now the rebels can come in and easily swoop up also the sympathy of the current military.
Right, exactly. So Assad has lost his support system, and it was the perfect time for the rebels to attack.
Okay.
They did, and now Bashar al-Assad has fled to Russia and is now living in exile.
So what does it mean for Christians?
Hold on. Hold on. We're not done yet.
Okay.
Hold on.
My question was, what does it mean for Christians if Assad was president and now Assad's not president?
Well, we got to. Who's the next president?
I was going to know who's in charge right now.
Nobody's the next president.
Isn't it al-Jolani?
He's not the president yet. He is.
There's a process, Toby.
Okay. Let James explain it.
Just kidding.
So Jelani is not currently the president of anything. Yeah, he's the main leader of one of the rebel factions. Okay. So he's probably the most public face and voice in this whole thing, but he's by no means the president of Syria yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rebels are still in process of trying to set up a transitional government and seeing what that looks like.
Okay. So now what I want to ask is, Christians.
You got Toby there, James. Finally.
So compare the two.
Yeah.
Compare Assad and
Christian life under Assad, Christian life under the new rebels,
and I guess, and then that's maybe as a secondary, like even just life under, like, I mean, in terms of like, what are we likely? What was it like, even for Muslims, for other people? And I mean, you're talking about all the, this iron fist, and then what is it? I mean, I know this is maybe somewhat speculative, but what is it likely to be under these rebels?
So one important thing to understand about dictatorships in general, they tend to work really, really well for some people and really, really badly for other people.
Right.
So the bargain you have in a country like Syria is that for some people, life is going to be okay.
Yeah. And
Christians will be among those people in general. Now,
like, okay,
I think it's really
will be okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no real beef between the Bashar al-Assad government and historic Christian communities in Syria. In fact, most of them see him as a pillar and a protector of minority rights in Syria.
Wow.
Okay.
Now, it's also really important for us to define terms here as well, because when we're talking about Syrian Christians, we're generally talking about the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're generally talking about is a sort of cultural Christianity that doesn't really believe in proselytizing, meaning the Eastern Orthodox in Syria don't do any evangelism and don't really have any intention of doing evangelism.
Okay.
So if you're an evangelical Christian who's trying to share the gospel, who is concerned with the souls of your countrymen in Syria and are trying to apply the Bible to everything, then you're much more likely to run into trouble with the Assad government as well.
Okay.
So going forward, we don't really know what the future looks like for Christians in Syria right now. Generally, when we have conservative Salafi Islam, there is an accommodation for Christianity under the sort of oldest, most conservative reading of the rules of Islam. Christians are forced to pay a specific tax called the jizya, and they are basically forced to live as second-class citizens in something called dhimmi status. Now, basically what that means is they can't have any role in the government or the military, and they have to pay a special tax to the government. So if you have a sort of kind of regular, orderly Islamist government coming in, then Christians will probably be more or less allowed to live and carry on their lives under the rules. The question becomes, will the new government actually be able to maintain order, or will you have a lot of people who are fresh off the battlefield, who are used to killing and looting, who are looking for their next target? There could be major anarchy in Syria after this, and that could end up being very, very bad for the Christians. But right now, they're not the first target.
Okay.
So is this, it almost sounds like you're painting the picture like, okay, one demon Assad out, potentially 7 demons coming in.
Plausibly.
Hey, so James, some of the questions I have here are kind of we'll come back to this, but it seems like it wasn't just, you said Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia, but I've been reading America has played some part in this as well. We're not hands off on this. We've been involved in some ways too. Why do we have interest here, and what has been our interest here?
So who knows exactly how deep America's interest goes, but America was involved in fighting ISIS, especially in Iraq, but also in Syria as well.
Okay.
Because in the power vacuum that came after the first revolution against Assad in 2012, it's in that power vacuum that ISIS emerged and started taking over large parts of Iraq and Syria. And some of the key people that were fighting ISIS were a group called the Kurds, who are sort of a unique ethnic and linguistic group in that kind of cross the borders of Syria, Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. And America has had a very close relationship with the Kurds in fighting ISIS. The Kurds also control a lot of oil as well. So America has had an investment in the stability of the sort of Kurdistan region, and therefore had a close partnership with the Kurds.
And so, I don't know all the details here, but it seems like that we were funding one side against Assad, and then I've read that the CIA was funding one side against Assad, and then the Pentagon was actually funding the other. And so, are we happy that this has happened? Because it seems like we were, in one way or another, we're kind of in support with, in opposition against Russia by seeing this whole thing fall. I don't know why we are funding. I mean, I get the ISIS situation and the oil, that can make sense. But what was our take on what's happened to Assad in America? Where do we feel?
Well, I think in general, America's going to be feeling pretty good about how things stand right now, because Assad was a big part of we've been calling the axis of resistance. That's what they've been calling themselves.
Right.
So you've basically had Iran, you've had Assad, you've had the Houthis in Yemen, and you've had Hezbollah in Lebanon. And our allies in the region tend to be Israel and the Saudis, and kinda Turkey. So the collapse of Bashar al-Assad kind of took everyone by surprise to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are happy that he's gone, but I think everybody is nervous about what comes next. So nobody's excited about a power vacuum.
Yeah.
But people are excited that the dictator is gone.
Do you know why Russia cared at all?
Yeah, Russia
Alliances.
cared because they're trying to expand their influence in the region. And Syria allowed them to have a warm water port in the Mediterranean and military bases in the region to kind of expand their influence. And basically, without Syria, they don't have a Mediterranean port anymore.
So I want to bring up a couple of tweets that I was collecting, getting ready for this show. The first one I want to bring up is the one about Putin. Can you bring that one up, Jacob? I'm just curious your thought here. This guy, Gummy Bear 737,
reliable source, highly reliable.
Really. People forget that Putin joined the Syrian civil war in order to push mass Muslim migration into Europe as a way to weaken Western resolve over Crimea. He was the architect of the 2015 migration crisis into Europe, yet the woke right loves Putin while ignoring illegal immigration. Now, you can speak to the last line if you want to, but I'm just curious initially about just the claims that Putin joined the Syrian civil war in order to push Muslim migration into Europe.
If that's what he was doing, that's really clever. And I think Vladimir Putin wants nothing more than for everyone to believe he's that smart.
Okay.
I mean, maybe. I mean, no one knows what Vladimir Putin is thinking.
Okay.
I think Vladimir Putin is an opportunist to some extent. Any politician has to be to some extent.
Right.
So I think there's all sorts of nefarious things he wants in the region. And this is kind of what happens with the sort of anti-American sentiment in the world. You have people like Putin, you have people like Iran complaining about Western interventionism. And they may have a point if their desire was not to replace us with their own empire. Right? Those are the players, right? Just because they are fighting something bad in the world doesn't make them good, and that applies to Putin.
Right. So you're in your mind, the most immediate goal of Putin would be to have access to the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
that's
throw that map again.
That's an easy attainable. I'll defend you, and you let me use your ports on the Mediterranean.
And if we're talking about mass migration to Europe, one of the countries that has suffered the most from mass migration would be Turkey, actually, because that's the first stop out of Syria for Syrian refugees. And they've taken a great deal of refugees. And that has kind of upended things in Turkey to some extent. And Turkey is seen as Putin's ally. So in order to do that, he'd have to... This has actually weakened his relationship with a key ally in the region, if that's really his plan. Yeah. So I'd be skeptical that it's that far thought out.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. All right. Here's another tweet. Pull up the Hen Mazig one, the one about Sinwar. Sinwar set out to destroy Israel on October 7th, but instead he destroyed Hamas, Hezbollah, Assad, and Columbia University.
You can speak to that last part if you want to.
Yeah, the last part's up to you, but I'm curious. So he's referring to the October 7th massacre and saying that the effect of this has been the destruction of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Assad. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, well, we'll see how long the destruction lasts. But I think, yes, this is absolutely true. It's a miscalculation. And the miscalculation is based on false theology. So Yahya Sinwar started the attack on Israel on October 7th because he did not want the Arab world to normalize relations with Israel. he didn't want the Palestinian cause to kind of like fade into the background. So the idea is you have this massive, shocking thing which provokes Israel into taking drastic action, which then turns the whole Arab world against Israel. And for a while, it starts to look like it was going to work. But the Israel that they attacked on October 7th was a fat, lazy Israel that was off its game at a particularly vulnerable point.
Okay.
And what you're starting to see now, starting with the Lebanon war, is an Israel that's very much at the top of its game right now. Okay. They are taking initiative. They just took like a lot of territory in Syria. In fact, the craziest thing they've done in the last few days is they destroyed all of Bashar al-Assad's military equipment.
Okay.
So what seems to have happened, right? Whether this story is true, I don't know, but the essence of it is true.
Okay.
So a day after Bashar al-Assad is out of power, Israel has 322 airstrikes on Syria.
Yeah.
And they destroy every tank, every aircraft field, every naval ship, every weapon stockpile in the whole country.
Okay.
And essentially the story goes that Bashar al-Assad is about to leave Damascus, and then some Israeli spy in his inner circle basically tells him, look, Israel knows where your helicopter is going, and we have the power to shoot it out the sky. If you want to leave here alive, we need all your intelligence of where all your military assets are.
Wow.
And then basically Bashar al-Assad basically trades that to Israel in exchange for his life.
Wow.
And then the whole military is destroyed. So the new incoming government does not have any military now other than automatic weapons.
So how do we?
That's insane.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
That is pretty wild.
So how do we process this? Because let's say we're living in the country, Syria, and it feels like it's almost like some sort of Mexican standoff with all the factions. Everyone's got to, who's going to take power? Everyone's got a gun at each other.
Always got to be racist, Gabe.
Well, we can call this an Assad standoff or something. I don't know. And so all these factions are obviously vying for power.
Right.
They just physically did some things to get Assad out. How do you sort through this? It's not a democratic process they're probably going to go through to nominate a president or whatever.
What was your first hint?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't even know how to sort through. Okay, Assad leaves. These factions are there, and
at least they don't have tanks.
Who's going to shoot first? That's true.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think probably the most stable faction right now is going to be the Kurds.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Kurds have limited objectives. So they have an area they want to either their complete own country or at least an autonomous region within Syria. And their goals are to protect their people, defend their borders, and basically go do their own thing. And they have a pretty good chance of succeeding at that. Okay. So if you compare this to Iraq,
so they could potentially get their own nation out of this, is what you're saying almost.
It's not impossible.
Okay. Interesting.
So in Iraq, for example, the real winners of the Iraq war, as far as how this played out after the war and the rebuilding, has been the Kurds.
Interesting.
Because the Kurds have self-organized, they've built their own economy within Iraq.
Yeah.
They've basically managed to negotiate semi-autonomy from the central government, and it's the safest, most prosperous part of Iraq right now. So the Kurds in Syria or at least want to go and do what their Iraqi cousins have done, basically.
Okay. There are a decent number of Christians among the Kurds?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are, and the key distinctive in Muslim countries is this generally fine to be a Christian. Where it's dangerous is if you once were Muslim and have become a Christian.
Got it. Right.
And
proselytizing.
Yeah. And to be an ex-Muslim Christian, the Kurdish regions in any of those countries are going to be one of the best places to be a Christian.
Okay.
So it looks like I'm looking at a map. Let me see if I can text it to you guys too. and if you can throw it up on the screen, that would be good. It looks like to me the Kurds kind of they're pretty saturated in some sort of northwest of Syria, northwest, northeast of Syria. There's another map that I have, and it looks like the Kurds are also in some sort of.
But the gold is
eastern
is the Kurds.
Turkey.
So the gold is the Kurds.
Correct, and then the map I'm looking at, eastern Turkey would that be east? Right? Would the right side be east? Never east.
East. Yeah.
Never east. East. So northeast Syria is dominated by Kurds, and then it looks like some sort of like eastern Turkey is dominated by Kurds, a little bit in Armenia, and then kind of western Iran and northern Iraq. So that whole area looks very Kurdish. That's all adjacent to that northern Syria. If you see what I'm saying, you might even be able to see the link I texted to you or the picture I texted you. Is that true? Like the Kurds just kind of dominate kind of this, Turkey, Syria,
that's a pretty large,
Iraq.
it's pretty large region.
It's pretty large. It looks like.
Yes. So it's a very important historic people group. So, for example, Salahuddin from the Crusades was Kurdish.
Mm-hmm.
And, it covers Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just kind of one contiguous region, it looks like, basically.
But they're, and you're saying they're even like kind of have a semi-autonomous like governmental structure. It sounds like you're saying.
Iraq, he said, or
only in Iraq. Yes,
only in Iraq. So in these other nations, like so in Turkey and in Syria, they're just a minority, a group.
Yes, correct. Especially in Turkey.
Yeah.
So when Turkey was formed as a sort of secular democratic nation in the sort of like the early 1900s,
okay,
they pushed really hard for the different ethnic groups to assimilate and all learn how to speak Turkish.
Okay.
And so there's always been this conflict between Kurdish rebels and sometimes terrorists in Turkey that have performed terrorist attacks against Turkish government sites. Now, the Kurds are not monolithic, but they have been oppressed in Turkey for sure, and they've done some bad things in Turkey too. So there's definite tension between Turkey and the Kurds, and President Erdogan of Turkey does not want an independent Kurdistan.
Okay.
So if you remember,
Bill, what were you going to say? You said something. Oh, okay. I thought you were saying something about this.
Because remember, Ian Kern worked with the ACC. I think it was the ACCS school in northern Iraq.
Yeah, there was a classical Christian school in northern Iraq. That was with the Kurds.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been there, Bill.
He helped start it.
You started it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you did.
Yes, of course, Bill. He's like, I know the president.
But George Grant was on the board or had some sort of help with it too.
Right. Right.
So that would make sense that they have some sort of autonomous relationship from the rest of Iraq to be able to do that.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, James, I wanted to ask you, what do the Syrian people want? So right now you have this faction that's come in and taken over the government. What do the people want on the ground?
It's a combination of people that want to live in peace, that want to have a free Syrian society where people can just kind of like be themselves and be free. Another group of people that desperately want revenge.
Hmm.
And then you have another group of people who want an Islamic government in Syria.
Revenge on who?
Bashar al-Assad. And the people that helped him.
Yeah. Okay.
And since Bashar al-Assad is in Russia, there's a big danger right now that vengeance is going to be carried out on someone else because you can't
get to Assad.
Get to the guy.
Yeah. Assad. You can't get to Assad. So
wow. Okay. But presumably then the people that propped him up, people that were his supporters.
Yeah. His high-ranking military officers and his supporters, and the official Giuliani's official policy is general amnesty as long as you're not fighting against us. But the Giuliani's movement is a decentralized movement that it's going to be very hard to keep everyone in order, and you're going to have a lot of people with personal vendettas who have seen absolutely awful things.
Right.
I had someone on my podcast who got to see his aunt cut in half by an airstrike right in front of his eyes.
Whoa.
People have seen awful things in Syria, and there's so much anger and resentment because of these things, and people want some sense of justice. And if you don't have a clear mechanism for justice and amnesty to take place, it could get really ugly really fast.
That's what I was going
to. What do you think about this statement? Like, it seems to me like, in a lot of ways, the whole mess in this region really originates from Israel's unfaithfulness in the Old Covenant. Because, I mean, look at that map. And Israel's small now. They used to have a lot bigger region. And because of, I mean, God wanted them.
Well, they rejected the Messiah.
They rejected Christ.
so kind of.
Yeah, so kind of they're in trouble. Yeah.
But if Israel was faithful, they would probably spread through all that region, preaching the gospel and being a light to all their neighbors around them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm going to ask, maybe we can come back to that, Gabe. I want to come back. Maybe we can talk. I definitely want to land there. I want to land at, thinking about
evangelism,
the gospel, and all this. But Jelani, James, what is your take on him? I mean, what do we know about him?
So where he's at now, I don't know, but he starts as an Al Qaeda guy.
Yeah.
And is at one point, I think, an ISIS guy.
Ooh. Yes.
Either way, he's involved.
Well, he was wanted. We've got a slide. He's wanted. You at that slide?
He's wanted by America.
Or he's like, there's like a $10 million reward out for him.
How likely is the CIA involved with all this? Probably 100%.
It's likely that their hands are on this somewhere.
This particular screen just points out that you guys recognize the guy on the right.
That's Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, he was celebrated by the American government. This is like some, I don't know, American newspaper.
Yeah. In the 80s.
Soviet warrior puts us on the road, on the road to peace.
Well, we funded Osama bin Laden back in the 80s.
I know.
Yeah.
And so people are just pointing out, like, the people that are celebrating Jelani.
Yeah.
Like, we've done this before. We've celebrated guys like this before.
And then we lost some buildings.
And then we, had to go to war against them. But finish. I'm sorry, James. Go finish.
So he's been leading this group of rebels, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or shortened to HTS, even though it sounds like a South Korean boy band.
Yeah.
The HTS are basically kind of a spin-off of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
But what he's said is they've kind of narrowed their goals, that they're done with the whole global jihad thing. They're done with trying to build something outside of Syria. They just want to take over Syria and make a sort of Islamic Syria.
Yeah.
And he's made several steps to trying to sort of play nice with religious minorities. So he's been ruling a city called Idlib, and Idlib actually just started allowing church services about a year ago.
Christian church services.
Okay. And so he's made lots of statements that all Syria's minorities are welcome. We're going to make sure you're a part of this country. This country is for all of us. Now, the question becomes, is he simply playing politics in order to gain power, or does he really mean this?
Okay.
Now, I would, wager money that if he was like the most hardcore of hardcore people, he'd be completely unwilling to play politics in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
So there is a certain sense of pragmatism in that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think, honestly, as the West, one of the best things we could do is almost take him at face value to some extent. Not in the sense that we let our guard down, but if we're prepared, if he says, we want a Syria which is peaceful and stable, has a free market economy, which he said, and is a place where all Syria's minorities can live. Maybe he's Don Corleone. Maybe he's sick of the life of organized jihad and wants to bring the family legit. That does happen to people sometimes.
Sure.
But even if he himself has done that, the problem he's going to have is that there's going to be all sorts of people within his movement who will refuse to compromise, who refuse to moderate, and will still be there to cause some problems. So I think we should neither trust him nor write him off, basically.
Yeah, right. Take him at face value and then wait and see how he plays his cards.
What do you think of Trump's comments about like this isn't our battle, stay out of Syria, this is not our fight, leave it alone?
Yeah, I think that's generally true. I think there are ways that Americans and especially Christians can be involved with this, but it really wouldn't be a wise thing to do to send American troops to try and like affect the outcome of the future of Syria right now.
And why? Why don't you just spell it? I agree with you, but spell it out.
Because ultimately, Syria is not something that's going to be fixed through external military intervention. Right? We do not have the power to go into Syria and build a secular dictatorship there. And the people aren't going to trust that anyway.
Right.
The solutions to Syria's problems have to come from within the hearts and minds of Syrians, not from some, external use of coercion.
Right. It would be just as successful as us trying to put a democracy in Iraq.
I was going to. I've been waiting to. Yes.
I mean, we kind of tried that before.
Right. This would be very similar to Iraq.
Right. We put Dominion voting machines in Iraq, and
well, they didn't work for us very well either.
We should have known.
I mean, so if you looked at the time frame, let's say that HTS is successful, he gets what he wants, he's able to manage some of the bloodlust that's living inside of his own camp. What does this place start to look like in the next 5 years?
I think it could be very interesting because there's a lot of Syrian refugees. There are currently 6 million 5 million Syrian refugees living outside of Syria.
Okay.
And a lot of them are now starting to make their way back to Syria.
Interesting.
Because they're excited about the new opportunity to build something.
Yeah.
So there's like a genuine chance that something good could come out of that.
Do you think, I mean, I've watched this with Iraq and some friends from the area. One of the things that I remember them review, I was all at the time anyway, I was like, go Iraq, go tear it down, let's go get rid of Saddam Hussein, the whole
tear
nine.
Down that wall.
Yeah.
Find those weapons.
Yeah, find those weapons. Yeah, I was all in. I repent of that. But one of the things that my friend told me, he's like, you keep on trying to give your idea and concept of democracy to us, and we're not built like that. You understand, we run differently. Mm-hmm. And so he was almost arguing in one sense for a type of strong arm dictatorship around certain things and loose around others. But he was still arguing, saying our people need strong and tough leaders, and it's not necessarily the kind of setup that you guys have in America. Is that the reality of Syria right now too? That they do need somebody who's going to be a little strong armed in some things?
Yeah, it's true, because that's kind of the foundation that Islam gives people. So if in Europe, the ideal of a leader used to be the sort of warrior, the sort of philosopher king, as outlined by Aristotle, and then embodied by Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
So every European dictator was trying to be Alexander the Great or Augustus Caesar, or who was also trying to be Alexander the Great to some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what Jesus says is, whoever wants to become greatest among you must first become the servant of all. So we get the term prime minister, prime first, minister, servant from the words of Jesus.
Interesting.
And so the idea behind that in the West is that the greatest leader is supposed to be a servant of his people.
Prime
and
servant. Amazing.
When you kind of have that kind of outlook that leadership looks like self-sacrifice to lift others up, then you have a different idea than this sort of strong man who's supposed to be the best warrior on the battlefield, the most pious religious guy, and the absolute best administrator, all wrapped into one package, right? Muhammad is that philosopher king for Muslims.
Yeah.
He was the absolute head of state, religion, and the battlefield.
Yeah.
So the idea of greatness means you defeat your enemies on the battlefield, you bring about a strong state which centers religion and competent administration, and that's how the cause of truth grows in the world, by having a sort of glorious, God-reflecting state with one person over both of those.
So James,
that's really good. So
if you were elected prime minister in Syria, how would you, knowing that, like, if you look weak, you're done? How would you as prime minister kind of sort through all this?
Basically, what I would do is I would sell everyone on the idea of decentralization. I would say we have lots of different outside powers trying to control us. You've got the Iranians, you've got the Turks, you've got the Americans, you've got the Israelis, you've got the Russians. All of them want to bite off a piece of Syria for their own agenda. Huh? And if we are going to have our own integrity, we need to do that. So what we need to do is let everyone kind of like live the way they want. So essentially you'd have kind of like, red states and blue states within Syria. And
it's worked out great for us.
Yeah. And so Syria might not be savable. Okay. There's no guaranteed way to do this. Mm-hmm. But essentially, you want a strong central government right now that is essentially going to insist on leaving the minorities to live life the way they want to live. It's like, all right, hardcore Muslims, you want to go live that way, you can live that the way in Idlib, but do not try and push that in Damascus. Alawites, you can be Alawites there. Christians, you can be Christians there. Kurds, you can have an autonomous Kurdistan. You'll pay minimal taxes. We'll have a friendly relationship. We'll never infringe this, but we want you to work with us to build a country that we can all live in together. And basically, you have to decentralize it and then work towards persuading everybody that working together is in everyone's best interests, basically.
So you said
Syrian nationalism. I got it. That's all you had to say. Syrian nationalism. All right, I get it.
Well, yeah, and I've actually seen that bandied about. Like the people are actually talking that way. Like that Jelani maybe is sort of is embracing some kind of Syrian nationalism. But anyways, you said a strong central government, but a central government that is decentralized. How does that work?
So we've been helping Afghan refugees for the last few years here in Seattle. And what we've noticed is that when a lot of Afghans get here, even including Christians, they very much have a slave mentality. They want somebody who's going to tell them exactly what to do and function like their tribal chief. Mm-hmm. They don't want to go take initiative. They don't want to go find a job. They don't want to go put their resume out there. They don't want to organize their own life. They want somebody to tell them exactly what to do, and then they'll work hard at that and do that.
Okay.
Now, a mature Christian doesn't live their life that way. A mature Christian is able to be self-ruled, to have self-government. And so what we've needed to be, to some extent, is start off in that kind of like, tribal chief mentality. You do this, and spend the time to teach them how to be independent and self-ruled.
Got it. Interesting. So it's strong central government to begin that process, you're saying, but it would need to be a very self-disciplined central government that's not hoarding power and authority, but is trying to give it away.
Exactly. So think of George Washington. He is a very strong leader,
right?
Who intentionally served for 2 terms and then stepped down and gave power away.
Right.
So you need somebody who believes in their blood in self-determination, in liberty and decentralization, but is prepared to acknowledge the situation on the ground and to kind of wield power appropriately, knowing what the actual situation is.
Is that possible? So I mean, back to the, we can't just foist democracy on Iraq. We can't just foist democracy on Syria. I was thinking about the famous quote from John Adams, that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And by that he meant a Christian morality, a Christian religious people. And so back to the Syrians, and I know there are some Christians there, but there's a lot of Muslims, there's a lot of other sects, there's a lot of other, what is that possible?
We'll see. I'd say if you look at Turkey,
okay,
they kind of succeeded in turning it into a slightly more decentralized democratic system in Turkey, but you still have an Islamic center of gravity, and it's trending more and more Muslim as time goes on, because secularism doesn't have any secularism without any sort of like Christian foundation it was all kind of imposed in Turkey through the force of one man's personality, a guy called Ataturk.
Yeah.
And it's gradually sort of like drifting back with the current guy to a more sort of Islamic focus.
Yeah.
So Islam's always going to have this center of gravity that's pulling people back towards this absolute sense of shared power between religion and government with one strong entity, because that's what is idealized in the Muslim world, and that's what's idealized in the Muslim source materials.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. Like the whole idea of separation of church and state.
Yeah, it's a
Christian idea,
right? Yeah,
it's totally a Christian idea. Like we want the state under God.
Yeah,
the state needs to answer to Jesus Christ. But the idea of different jurisdictions, different governments, family, church, state, and so on, like that's a thoroughly Christian idea.
Is that a part of the Eastern Orthodox there? Do they have that same idea there in Syria?
Of the union between religion and government?
Yes.
I don't know. But historically, Eastern Orthodox has definitely trended that way.
Yeah.
So
with the relationship with the Byzantine emperors and such.
Right.
Couple questions here. How many people are in Syria?
Wish I knew the answer to that.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Several million, like...
I'll get it.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking... So, do you know if there's any Christian schools there?
I don't, actually.
The reason I'm asking is because earlier you said, and I've just been pondering this...
23 million.
23 million, okay.
In 2023.
So it's basically like the size of Florida.
30 million. Yeah,
the size of Florida.
Yeah.
Okay, so the fight that's there seems like it's over the moral mental imagination of the people, because if Islam is the moral mental imagination of the people, then that's the default. Then there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can have that's Christian in the environment or the government.
Right.
So then your ground game is the only thing you have. So you got churches and then you got schools, and you have a 40-year trek of trying to change the moral mental imagination of a people over the next 40 years. That's the only option that I see to getting a stable government there that looks that has human flourishing a part of it.
Yeah, I agree. That's basically what needs to happen. There has to be a amazing ground game, and that's going to be true anywhere in the Middle East now.
Yeah, we're dealing with that here. Our forefathers just ran the ground game so good for us. We have so much blessing from it.
James, so transitioning a little bit to your ministry, you're ministering to Muslims in Seattle from all over this region. What are you hearing? How is this affecting your ministry? How is this affecting the Muslims in the United States?
What I'm seeing right now, and I actually have an interview on my YouTube channel with a guy who's a Muslim Syrian refugee talking about his experience. Yeah. But what I'm seeing is a lot of this in America goes through the sort of Israel-Palestine matrix.
Okay.
So there's a lot of my Arab friends are really mad at each other right now, because a lot of non-Syrian Arabs are mad at the Syrian Arabs for overthrowing Assad and supporting his overthrow, because Assad was part of the operation against Israel.
Right.
And a lot of the Syrian Arabs are saying, look, we care about the Palestinians. We want to fight for the Palestinians, but we've got to overthrow our own dictators. We have to take the opportunities we're given here. So there's a lot of sort of resentment going on right now. I don't know. It's still very fresh, so I haven't had that many interactions about this so far. Yeah. But if it's anything like Afghanistan or the Israel-Gaza thing, then it's going to lead to a lot of very interesting conversations, but also great opportunities to be kind of gospel light into those relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. What we've talked about this before. I mean, I think last year when the October 7th thing happened, I think, did we talk to you, James? I think it was last year. But just, what is your take on the present? I mean, as you talk to these Muslims, you're ministering to these Muslims, many of whom see Israel as this massive existential threat. What how do you handle that? I mean, how do you work with those people?
So it's actually a great opportunity to talk to people, because you've kind of got to focus to the person you're in the moment with. Sure. And what you can explain to them is that the world that Jesus lived in was very similar to the world that a Palestinian would live in today. Meaning that the Jews at the time of Jesus lived in their historic homeland, but didn't have any sovereignty over their land.
Right.
They had access to their holy place, but they were constantly afraid of going to lose it. They had military checkpoints and Roman army officers bossing them around, being like, pregnant woman, move from this town to this town for the sake of government math.
Right.
And you have this constant idea, there's constant fear in the air that there's going to be some giant revolt and then the corresponding crackdowns that come with that. And you have a lot of normal people who get caught in the middle of that.
Right.
Like, think of the kids who were killed in Bethlehem as they were looking for Jesus.
Right.
The collateral damage of innocent people is something that Jesus is very familiar with, and that's what he lived in.
Yeah.
Yet, what Jesus is doing in his day and age is not starting with political solutions that drive the oppressors into the sea, but actually giving you, the individuals, things that you have to focus on, like loving your enemies, praying for those who persecute you, having the right attitude.
Yeah.
And that means being able to visualize a world where your enemies can one day become your friends.
Mm.
And
by the gospel,
kind of taking them to the life of Jesus, I can kind of push them on things and then get into conversations about the gospel with that.
When you talk, when you think about this, or I don't know if this comes up in conversation or not, but like, so that's absolutely where it begins. And as you pointed out earlier, the Christian heritage, even of political power, begins with understanding that you are in a place of ministry, you're a place of service. At the same time, that doesn't mean that nations disappear or that political power just utterly evaporates. There's a good use of the civil sword, of justice, and nations, are part of God's plan for the world. How do you go from love your enemy, do good to those who persecute you, have a good attitude, which is exactly where the gospel begins. But how do you trace the steps from there to, what if one of the guys that you're evangelizing, some eye doctor that you're evangelizing gets called up to become the president of Syria? How do you connect those dots for him?
Yeah, this guy I'm grooming to be the emir of Gaza.
Hey,
we knew it.
Hey,
we knew it.
It's possible.
That's post-meal.
It's very possible.
I'm kind of half joking, but I know a Christian who was Muslim who was part of the Hamas government at one point, who lives here in Seattle.
Wow.
So a lot of that is like how you get there has to in part be through, persuasion. So there's a few steps here, right? So what's very unlikely to happen is to get a Christian dictator of a Muslim country. Now, it's not impossible.
Right.
We'll certainly try, but that's not generally how it's going to happen. And if that does happen, then the guy's task is to be wise as a serpent, as gentle as a dove. That's going to be a really, really difficult situation to be in. Generally, what's going to need to happen is we've got to invest in more ground game. So we've got to make, as we see, so let's take somewhere like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a growing Christian movement in Saudi Arabia right now. And you have a government that's less hostile to Christians than there has been in a very long time. realistically, if the government built a giant church in downtown Riyadh, the government would be overthrown within a day. But the government would be able to take incremental steps to make it more and more difficult to persecute Christians under the law and make laws which make life easier for Christians in the area.
Yeah.
And so as those kind of things happen, then Christians kind of need to build enclaves in the area where they can start to build schools, to plant churches, to get married, to build Christian versions of their own cultures all throughout the Middle East. And there's places it's becoming more and more viable to do this in. So one of those would be Dubai right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can be openly Christian in Dubai. You can have church services. You can preach what you want to preach. No one's going to come after you unless you're directly evangelizing Emirati citizens. You might get in some trouble there. But otherwise, you can be an ex-Muslim Christian in Dubai. No problem.
Okay.
I know several of them.
Okay.
Kurdistan in Iraq would be another one of those places, which is getting to become better and better for Christians to live in the area. So I would say, we focus on keeping those places prosperous and protected and let them be sort of centers of culture. And as those places start to succeed, it normalizes Christianity within those cultures.
That's good.
And if you're a Christian in government there, those are the kind of things you can be supporting and championing. That's basically allowing Christianity and Islam to live side by side in the area. And there's some legit chance of that actually happening.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying it's sort of like leaven in a loaf.
Yes, absolutely.
So you get, you do get the occasional Joseph raised up in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
You get the occasional, the king of Nineveh repents.
Mm-hmm.
You get the occasional Daniel raised to the right hand of Nebuchadnezzar. So we do see occasional instances of that. But Jesus himself said, this is how the kingdom comes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to come like leaven in a loaf. Like, generally speaking, what you ought to be doing is be faithful where you are, but you want to be an incrementalist.
There goes that word again.
Let's use the example of Esther here, right?
Yes.
So Esther is in a very high position.
Right.
And
in a pagan
Nehemiah's
nation.
in a high position, Daniel's in a high position. What do you see happen there? They don't turn Persia into a Jewish nation.
Right.
They use their position within the government to speak the truth to the power.
Yes.
Seemingly saving some people's souls in the process.
Yes.
And they make the society more advantageous and fair and just for their own people.
Right.
So that they're able to thrive in that society.
Right.
So they don't impose Judaism top down, even in Esther.
Right.
It's all defensive.
Right.
They're allowed to defend themselves and build their own little enclave and prosper within that. And I think that's a good model for us to think about.
So that's good.
So
that's really
part
good.
of me a little bit though, it's like if let's say we live in Syria and the dictator leaves, and I know there's all this kind of tension between factions, and I know some factions are could be potentially super violent for our nation. Some factions would be okay. I almost, as the church, would like to, it's the first crime scene is not that bad. It's the second crime scene. So in some sense, I would like to try to find a way as the church to really lean in and, declare Syria a Christian nation, and we're going to, everyone go to church on Sunday. And would that backfire, or would that, actually
it would
stop that first crime scene from even happening?
No, it would backfire.
I think so.
I think so, because if what James says is true, then the moral imagination of the people is not even close to being where you're at. I think there's a point where that can, what do you call it? You said it has a dimmer?
Yeah, dimmer switch.
Dimmer switch. You just went hot, straight from cold, just hot, right? Yeah. And that's not, you can't change, you change a culture like that and you will get civil war. Yeah. Right, you will get civil war, and it seems like the leaven in the loaf is the right approach, right? What I would be trying to push for is hey,
and there's Go ahead, finish.
Can we get a Christian? Can we get a school as a church so we can teach our kids? Can we what's the thing that you can get? Because if the Reformation has showed us anything, you got a church, you bring a school, you change a nation.
So maybe not run a PR play, but maybe start a school.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess there are like crisis points. Like, Esther does have a point where she's like, I'm going to risk my life for my people.
Sure.
Because there's a
asking for a Christian school might just be a life risking moment.
There are sometimes crisis moments and you have to step into the breach and you risk your life and you risk a lot. And so there it's not like when we say leaven in the loaf, we're not saying only do safe plays.
No,
that's not what we're saying.
I don't think that was a safe play.
No. But I think it's like you pray, you work, you count your troops, and then you got to be ambitious for Christ. You got to be ambitious for the gospel, and it's totally taking risks because you totally want to gain on it. You totally want to take the talents that the King is giving you, and you want to turn a profit on those talents. You want to bring back more to the King than he gave to you.
That's right.
So it's very ambitious, but it's not stupid.
Yeah.
It's not inflammatory. It's not belligerent.
Right.
I mean, even one thing is trying to get free markets.
Sure.
Like we take for granted so much the idea that free trade, it's not a neutral thing. It's a Christian concept and idea. Yeah. And you get that going and all of a sudden it starts transforming the way people think about culture and society and humans, and the anthropology starts changing and then they think about serving others better than they think about themselves, right? And so you get free market, it's amazing how it transforms a society. And we don't think about those things. Like there's all sorts of wonderful tools God has given that are common that we don't use or utilize in these moments that we have access to. James, I see you wanted to say something. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. So if you want, there's a few things you can do, right? Firstly, any Christian in almost any city in the West right now probably has Syrians living in their city.
Okay.
And a great deal of Syrian refugees, especially in Europe, have actually become Christians after having to flee the crisis in Syria over the last few years. So people in our sort of wheelhouse, need to be making sure that those people are discipled well and not on a surface level. Yeah. And that's going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of investment from Christians to do that. Not necessarily for the sake they're definitely going back, but some of them would like to. Yeah. And if we give them the tools to do that, that'd be amazing. Right? So anyone in any city can do that. And you were talking about what we could do in Syria now. Well, if there's a Logos classical Christian school in Iraqi Kurdistan, we should seriously start about thinking about starting one in Syrian Kurdistan.
Yeah.
And if Kurdistan is taken over by Turkey or something, then, strategic retreat back to Iraqi Kurdistan, where there's a strategic effort to train Syrians from Iraq and build a sort of safe enclave there where people can kind of grow. But here's the thing. The sort of liberal sort of social justice people have all been very invested in the Palestinian cause, have been invested in the Middle East, which means there's so much of this grievance politics from the West that has infected things over there too.
Wow.
And that's at play. So this means, and it's very difficult for us to complain about that, where if we as Reformed Christians who believe in, all of Christ for all of life have been completely removed from the situation. So we have to find ways to get involved, to get skin in the game, to outwork the enemy and work to have to see Christian communities thrive in the Middle East that are going to be a blessing to their nations, a blessing to their neighbor, and let the light of the gospel shine brightly throughout the whole Middle East.
That's good. That's a good word.
James, what's your website and that interview that you said on your YouTube channel? People want to check that out. Where can they go?
Yeah, so you can look us up with the Almeida Initiative on YouTube. You should probably post that in the description.
Yes.
It's hard to spell. And then it's almeida.org to see the kind of work we're up to.
You're welcome to stick around, James, if you want. We're going to close with a hymn, O Come, O Come Emmanuel, but first this ad. Most real estate transactions happen at pivotal moments in life, both happy and sad, like a growing family or the loss of a loved one. At Story Real Estate, buying and selling homes isn't just about closing deals. The folks over there know that it's a big life moment. Now, if you love serving people through these types of moments, Story Real Estate is looking for great people to join their team. So go to storyrealestate.com, click menu, and then join our team to apply. Oh, there's another ad.
Really?
Christmas is a time for decking the halls, singing jingle bells, feasting on cookies, and getting a Fight, Laugh, Feast pub membership.
Yes.
That's right. Get a library of hard-hitting theology, cross-politic backstage interviews, all Fight, Laugh, Feast conference talks, courses with David Bonson, Doug and Nancy Wilson, exclusive merch, and much more. Pub TV memberships at a silver level or above get 15% off through the end of December. Head to fightlaughfeast.com and use the code MARY15 when signing up. That's fightlaughfeast.com, code MARY15. And that's really one of the best Christmas presents we get is when you join. When you join and become a club member. Okay, this is O Come, O Come Emmanuel. You guys recognize the hymn tune.
The song.
But you guys have not heard these words before.
Okay.
I mean, you've heard some of them.
Yeah.
But not quite like this.
Okay.
This is like, I think this is like maybe a British version or something. Maybe James knows it. I don't know.
Okay.
O Come Emmanuel. It's redeem thy captive Israel that into exile drear is gone. Far from the face of God's dear son. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come thou branch of Jesse, draw the quarry from the lion's claw, from the dread caverns of the grave, from nether hell thy people save.
That sounds Scottish.
O come, thou dayspring bright, pour on our souls thy healing light. Dispel the long night's lingering gloom, and pierce the shadows of the tomb. O come, thou Lord of David's key, the royal door fling wide and free. Safeguard for us the heavenward road and bar the way to death's abode. And the last verse says, O come, Adonai, who in thy glorious majesty from that high mountain clothed in awe gavest thy folk the elder law. It's a cool. I was listening to this one. I really like this version. I was like, what are they singing?
Can you copy and paste that to me?
Yeah,
I'd love to send that to my family.
You know the elder law?
No.
Sinai.
That's what I thought.
It's the elder law.
The original? Yeah.
It's the elder law.
Wow.
Yeah.
I like that.
Anyway.
Is it like elder law is how it's spelled out?
Yeah, 2 words. Elder law. Anyways, it's just like, it's a cool, I don't know, maybe it is like kind of a Gaelic or British version. I don't know. Anglo-Saxon. But anyways, I thought it was just a pretty cool version. Like, it's the same hymn, obviously.
Yeah.
Same themes. But like, we don't get to sing about lion's claws enough.
Yeah.
That's true.
Did you hear that? Right? I mean, where does that word go? Where'd it go? I guess I'm going to find it. O come thou branch of Jesse, draw the quarry from the lion's claw. From the dread caverns of the grave, from nether hell thy people save. Anyways, love that line. So I thought of this hymn for the Psalm of the Day because I knew we were talking about the Middle East and about the turmoil in Israel and Palestine and Syria. But all this underlines the situation of so much of our world. To be far from the face of God's dear son is to be far from home. That's what it says. It says to be in exile is to be far from God's dear son, to be captive in exile. This is the situation of all sinners in all of this world. There can be no true homeland for sinners in this world until you get right with God, because this world belongs to the triune God. You can't make this place a home. You can't make a home in any nation until God is your father. In our state of rebellion against our maker, we are held captive by our sin, by the grave, by political chaos and turmoil, by hatreds and envies and grievances and lawlessness of every kind. And in this great hymn, we pray for God to come and establish the kingdom, to establish the rule of King Jesus, the day spring bright, the branch of Jesse, and reestablish his just and holy law, first given on Sinai. In Psalm 110, it says, I did a psalm. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. The New Testament repeatedly applies this psalm to Jesus, particularly in his resurrection and ascension. In 1 Corinthians 15, it says he must reign until all his enemies have become his footstool. That's quoting Psalm 110. Hebrews says that he's sitting at God's right hand, far above all the angels, and all things have been put beneath his feet. That's Psalm 110. And even though we do not yet see everything put beneath him, we see him crowned with glory and honor through his suffering, death, resurrection, and ascension. Again, that's Hebrews. So we sing this hymn, and when we do, we're not pretending that Christ has not come.
Yeah.
We're not reenacting Israel in the first century under Roman rule. When we sing this hymn, we are calling out to our crucified, risen, and ascended King, the branch of David. The day spring is at the Father's right hand, ruling in the midst of his enemies. That's what it says in Psalm 110. He rules in the midst of his enemies. We have a bunch of enemies. Much of the world still lives in captivity to sin, Satan, and death. Much of the world still lives in fear of the lions, of tyrants and terrorists, and the plots and schemes of wicked men. So we do. And Christ rules in the midst of his enemies. We are crying out in this hymn for light. We're crying out for salvation. We're crying out for deliverance for our neighbors, for our family members, for our nations, and for this world. But we're not crying out in fear and despair. We're crying out in faith, knowing that our Father, who sent his beloved Son into this dark world, will not give us a stone when we ask for bread. And we are asking for bread. We are asking for the bread of life, the bread of fellowship, the bread of peace for us, for Israel, for Palestine, for Syria, for Iran, for Turkey, for Europe, for America, for Ukraine. We're asking the King of these nations, who is Jesus, to establish his rule, his law, his peace. And so we rejoice because Emmanuel has come, and he most certainly will come until all his enemies have been put beneath his feet.
Amen. Cheers to the King.
Cheers.
There you go.
I drank all right.
Yeah, that's okay. I got a little bit. Well, if you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until tomorrow, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politic.